Teresa, this is a very good question. And I like the way that you framed it. We're going to break this down, okay? Because, most of the time, and I think that this truly shows that this law is supposed to be an individualized program. So I get what you're saying, but see, he's at a perfect age in order to do this analysis. Because according to the law, we are to educate our children to the maximum extent appropriate inside the general education setting, okay? Now, he's transitioning from preschool over to kindergarten. Another step that we're supposed to do as an IEP team is we're supposed to presume competence, all right? So if we presume competence, then it would dictate that he needs to try a general education kindergarten setting, push in services in that environment, and then, if they're not appropriate, then you start moving outside of that continuum, and, he may end up in a self-contained environment. And I can tell you, I do have clients that we just know on the outside, or the IEP team agrees that, the best placement for the child from transitioning to preschool to kindergarten is the self-contained environment. At the same time, I've had many clients that that's the presumption that they go or track right into the self-contained environment from preschool, skip right over the opportunity to see if kindergarten would be appropriate. And I fight to get these children out of these environments. So I have seen this from multiple different angles, including with my own child when she was that age. Okay, and my child is not a general education child, and she is, has autism, and at that age especially nonverbal. And so therefore, she was also receiving very specific BCBA services and support. And actually she has since that point and on through. The difference being is that she was never in a specialized program outside of her kindergarten. Outside of her preschool environment. Once she entered kindergarten, then we always created the environment she was in, and we were in a small county to begin with. We always created the environment that she needed to be to ensure that we had the right staff supports. The behavior analysts involved trained the staff to competency. We ensured that the goals that my child had were attached to the ABLES or the BB map, so that not only was the IEP in compliance with the mandate to tie the goals to the standards, but also we had a very specific autism program to where we were working on skill acquisition and behavior reduction all the time, including functional skills, because she toileted later. So we created the environment we needed to, partly because one didn't exist out where we lived. And the other thing is, I believe in this law, and I believe that our public educators can implement this stuff, and they can do it correctly, and they can do it per the peer-reviewed and scientifically based formats and programs and curriculum. So, with that being said, what you're wanting is basically to replicate the environment that he's been successful in your preschool, and that there's not a district placement for that. They're trying to sell you on a self-contained environment that has a max of 12, a max complement of 12 students. And if I understood that correctly, 1 aide and 1 teacher. That's the number one concern for me. That's why I wouldn't do it. Is that there needs to be, on average, 1 aide per 3 students. And I do not consider the teacher part of that threshold, and the reason I don't is that the teacher is in charge of all of the IEPs and sort of the manager or supervisor over all the IEPs and the implementation. So therefore, it's impossible to consider the teacher part of the aid complement or the support complement when the support staff is there to support not only the children, but to support the educator, as the educator is responsible for providing FAPE to all the children in the classroom. So that's where the ratios are totally screwed up on what they're trying to sell you on, even at 6. So let's say there was even 6. There should be, at least 2 aides to support the teacher. That would be 3 children each. Now, you could press for a designated aide, or you could sit there and press for... They should probably, I don't know. I mean, it's one of those things to where that's a negotiating point. Having the behavior analysts involved or the psychologists involved in order to train the existing staff to a level of competency. The other thing is that you need to take into consideration is that there's 2 arguments to be made whether your child needs an autism-specific program, or there would be benefit for your child to be in around their general education peers to the max extent appropriate in order to model socially appropriate behavior. I don't know whether that, out-of-district placement would have those opportunities. The second thing is that you reference that he would be in there with children with varying needs and differing disabilities. And, most federal courts are not going to be sympathetic, along with hearing officers to that kind of argument, because that runs also along the threshold of at least if I was a board attorney, that's how I would argue it, that, on its face, even that's discriminatory, that you don't want your child around other children. It's just devils, I'm making an alternative argument, and that's something that, wouldn't necessarily fly. I understand what you're saying, and an autism-specific classroom, as long as it is designed that way, because there's a lot of schools that they'll create these behavior units, so they'll call them autism units. But then when you really peel back the onion, are they really autism units? What makes them special, or what makes them driving toward the peer-reviewed and scientifically based approaches known for autism? And if those don't exist, then they're just corralling all the autistic kids together and putting them in a class. And that I see all the time. So in your particular situation, the only difficulty I'm not going to say only, the big glaring obstacle that you're going to have is the fact that you have no more data than the school does to support the ineffectiveness of the program offered within their district. And that's going to be a huge, huge hurdle. Not saying that you couldn't overcome that, but, I know that we hate to see or hate to use that term wait to fail, but a school system is the one with the legal duty to provide a FAPE. So the responsibility is on them 100%. And that's why you go in to try to negotiate the best possible outcome in the existing place that is offered. And if they're selling it self-contained, then you have plenty of time between now and August to get those commitments for competency-based training of the staff, for an increase in staff numbers. And if they knew that you were thinking about an out-of-district placement that you wanted them to pay for, then that may actually help them work closer with you in order to make their existing placement better. I will tell you that we just settled a case to where, they split the existing class that was up to 5 students each, with a teacher and 2 aides to support the class. So it brought the complement within the acceptable range, and it was a self-contained class. And, I brought a BCBA in to help support and train the staff to competency in one of the classes that had my client in it. I couldn't do anything about the other one. So what I'm saying is that, we brought that complement down the client of mine, does have an ASD diagnosis, and we are enveloping him in that kind of program that he requires per the science and the recommendations. So it can be done, but the one thing that you're going to need that neither side, I'm talking about the board or you, will have is the evidence to show that their program is ineffective for your child. And because this is an individualized program, you would need evidence to put on. And, both of you would be arguing from a position of what? And that's why time and time again, what the courts have said is that the school, because they're the ones with the legal duty to provide a FAPE, gets an at-bat, okay? Using a baseball term, they need their opportunity to swing and strike out before you can come in and say, well, I want my child in this placement. Not saying that doesn't happen all the time, not saying that, parents don't have to pay for the private placement, then file due process, but they run the risk of losing. You never want to file a due process case, without that real possibility that you're just not going to have somebody that agrees with you on that. And that's why I always caution parents to get the evidence that they need to support their position. And the only way you're really going to get the evidence that you need to support your position is you can use your current placement with the ratio that your child has, but that doesn't necessarily mean that ratio and the services and those things that you have currently can't be provided in the placement that they're suggesting. So that's the danger point that you would be running into if you were to want to jump over their placement option over this out of district placement. You'd need the evidence to support that their placement is inappropriate for your child. And if this was my case, I would be doing everything in my power now to negotiate it into the kind of placement that I would need, giving them an opportunity to make it into the kind of and look how many other children you'd be benefiting if they were able to be successful in that, if they were able to commit to that kind of training that you're asking for. There are many other disability categories within the developmental disability family that would benefit from the kind of program that we know works for autism. So, as part of your advocacy and fighting for your son, you very well could turn lemons into lemonade perceptively, and I understand your fear. Yet at the same time, don't be afraid, and I know you're not, I'm just using this as a term, to roll up your sleeves and do some heavy lifting to help make the public education system better. And, that's exactly what I do. But everything that I'm seeing that you've written down looks like they want to do it, looks like they can do it. And it also looks like you are already in contact with third-party professionals that could help you make it possible within that setting. They just need to beef up the staff. That's it. And then they need some training. But it needs to be competency-based training. And it needs to be specific for your son's program. And I would give it 9 weeks. Therefore, you'd have the data. If they failed and if it was a miserable experience, then you would have your data to be able to support that out-of-district placement because you gave them their at-bat. You gave them that opportunity, 9 weeks or a semester would be what I would do, have my data. And if it works out, if it's great, thumbs up. Bravo, congratulations to you on the excellent job that you did, on your IEP team. If it didn't, then you would have the necessary data to support the decision that this out-of-district placement is better for him and more appropriate. if you do that, though, just make sure that, and if you want the school district to pay for that placement, just make sure that you do submit a 10-day written notice, making it very clear what you're unhappy about and that you're going to be pursuing them for the cost of this placement. That's a requirement. You got to do that, or you risk the possibility of having, that be a bar, either on the hearing officer level or on the federal court level, of not allowing the reimbursement period if you don't give them 10 days notice before you unenroll and remove your child. Very interesting question. And there are about 15 ways to look at this and do an analysis. So I'm glad you asked it. Okay.